you. Right, okay, so we now have time for deliberations. Why don't we go back to the internal submission right at the beginning, and let's have a discussion around the pros and cons or otherwise of on page 3. Project 380, Sustainable Land Management, and I'll hand that over to Mr. 80.
Yeah, Mr. 80. Yeah, I have outlined the fundamentals of this. In response to a question before. So basically, the bar is high in terms of our ability to implement or the implementation plan for Plan Change 6. The uncertainty in terms of what exactly will be required and the best way to mitigate whatever we need to out of Plan Change 6 has really put a brake on this, but a lot of the consultation work with the group associated with the Papanui catchment has been done, and we have moved this quite substantially along the pathway. Other catchments will follow, and we will need quite significant resource to be able to encourage the implementation associated with reduction of nutrients into waterways as per Plan Change 6. So what we're looking for, we will be pushing a bow wave of expectation. We are now, but we haven't got the degree of certainty that we need in order for farmers to commit to this. That is the issue at this stage. We're expecting that to change any time, and we'll want to start moving forward as quickly as possible. So we certainly are confident that the demand is out there. All we need is the certainty, and away we'll go.
Mr. Chairman, questions around that? Councillor Dick.
Yeah, my colleague, Councillor Hewitt, said to me before that this catchment or sub-catchment is a hotspot that needs to be dealt with.
Yes, that's
and
good.
It's a hotspot for what? Phosphorus, nitrogen.
High levels of nutrients in the waterway, in the water. Yes. Okay. Along with the two really significant catchments. One is Papanui, one is Parongaho Stream, which feeds into into the Tukipo ultimately. Yes.
Okay. Well, her comments help persuade me that maybe it should stay there.
If I can add to that, there's a group of farmers in that catchment, and they meet every 6 weeks voluntarily, and they've been doing a lot of work for the last 2 years. So it's certainly a work in progress. I'm prepared to move the recommendation when you're ready.
Well, we're not. We're just having a chat at the moment. Just trying to put some. What was your term before? Meat on the bones, I think. Councillor Bevan, you had a question.
You're borrowing it back again.
I am. Yeah.
It's a little bit vague on what's actually planned to be done with this 120,000. Is it to fund plantings, or is it to help with fencing, or is it to develop plans, or I mean, what's the?
Yes to all of those. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like some clarity around the work that would need did with RWSS or without RWSS. Because when we did the field trip there, we looked at the issues around this and the proposal how to shift water into that area through the RWSS, which in itself is part of the solution. The work to clean this area up would need to go ahead whichever outcome there is. That's correct, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So what's holding it up is the
So-
clarity around what some of the answers might be.
As the certainty around Plan Change 6, yes.
Further questions? Okay, let's carry on. Thank you.
Ian, next one.
Project 320, surface water quantity.
Thank you, Chair. A reasonably straightforward request for this one. Hydrometric sites, our flow sites, the data that comes into the building has to be audited. So we take the raw data and put it through a process of grooming, if you like, to make it therefore available for other work, i.e. feeding into models or to undertake other assessments. Previously, that audit process has been conducted on a good or best practice basis in the absence of a national standard. The NEMS process has now developed a national standard for doing these audits and quality coding the data. We've been aware that the standard has been imminent, so we've been poised waiting for the standard to come through before conducting the audit, so we can conduct the audit against the NEMS standard. So it's now just through. We want to conduct the audit, but it won't be done in time for this financial year, so hence the request to carry it forward. So the work is planned, we're ready to go, it's just a timing issue.
Thank you. Questions? Let's go, Councillor Scott.
The perennial guidance didn't come through that we need to meet. What is the timetable going to be for this? Have we got any indication?
The NEM for doing this particular bit of work or the NEM stuff?
Well, the NEM stuff, yeah.
So NEMS, the water quality standards for NEMS have been developed and released, and the water quantity stuff is under development. And they've basically got quite a large list, and they're systematically checking, knocking
This
them
year, this month,
off the
this
top of my
year,
head.
next year.
Look, I can't remember what their timetable is. I think they've got a couple of years of funding out of Ministry for the Environment and the regional sector to develop the standards, because there is a big list. There's a person who is contracted in to project manage the NEMS process that relies on in-kind support from all the sectors, as well as the CRIs and the likes of power companies to assist with the standard development. So it is a bit iterative, and it has been staged in a manner that's achievable in terms of capacity for people.
Can I just follow up? Really what I'm asking is, are we confident this money will be used in this coming financial year?
Oh, so sorry, to be clear, the standard is available now to do the audit.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't ready in time for us to get a contractor organised to
Okay,
conduct the
thanks.
audit.
Yep.
Sorry.
Everyone's happy with that? Good. Okay, let's move on to 339, Regional Land Science Research.
Thank you again. So there's a reasonably sort of detailed précis there for you. I really just want to reinforce that, in essence, what we were looking to develop for the Greater Hiratonga area was a TRIM type model, or a contaminant transport type model. So there was money set aside to do that. During the process of the various advisory groups we've got up and running for the development of our coupled ground and surface water model, there was a desire from staff to move to a more advanced modelling platform for that model development, and we bounced that off the various groups who said yes, like the idea, get on with it. That movement has now opened up the opportunity for us to use a effectively off-the-shelf contaminant transport module that bolts onto that groundwater model called SURFACT, and means that the contaminant transport model can be developed at a lower cost than developing a TRIM type model, which is a kind of a purpose-built. You have to start right from the sort of base level and build the thing up. This basically brings in a bunch of information in a process that pre-exists. What the advisory groups have said is, yep, that's a good idea, move into that model domain, but what you need to do is go away and utilise the released or freed up funds to gather data to calibrate the model, so it provides you with information that's realistic for the scenarios you're wanting to run. as well as general background data to make the model work effectively, i.e. groundwater age and direction, contaminant sources, those sorts of things. So again, the work was planned and was going to happen anyway. We've changed tack slightly. Because we've changed tack slightly, we now need to go away and gather more data. We weren't able to do that in this financial year, but the intent is to roll it over to allow the development of the model with the new data supporting it. So at the end of the day, we'll end up with a model that is cutting edge, will be able to be populated with more data for a greater level of calibration than we might have expected from a kind of a bespoke or in-house built model. So we've effectively raised the bar in terms of the model outputs we're going to have. But of course it means a bit of money to carry forward.
Councillor Belford.
My question doesn't relate so much to the model itself, which I understand what the new model is. It's to the data coming into it that you're referring to here. We obviously got into a big bun fight in the Ruatanifis scheme as to what the hydrology meant, whose hydrologist was, more accurate in terms of projections, what have you. So the model is only as good as it's a garbage in, garbage out situation. So when you talk about data coming in, I've been hearing some concerns about whether we have sufficient and the right type of data to actually fuel a model at the end of the day. So when you talk about more data being collected to fuel this model, could you be more elaborate? And this money could be used for that purpose, I gather.
Yeah.
What do you have in mind more precisely?
So just to capture a couple of other points that you made, in terms of the development of this model, absolutely we've taken what we've learnt from the Tuki catchment proposal process to say, can we do it better? And hence we've got two groups running that are, if you like, advisory groups to the council and the science team, and ultimately to me around what do we want to do, and are we satisfied it's the right thing to do? We've got an advisory panel which is made up of, if you like, academics in a modelling space who look at the very detailed elements of the numerical parts of the model. Do we connect A with B, or do we put another bit in the middle? Those sorts of things, very detailed model stuff. And we also have an advisory group which involves technical specialists from various stakeholder groups, industry, environmental groups, various stakeholders, tangata whenua at the table to hear from the science team around what's being proposed and how, and then to challenge that and test it and pose the questions, and then advise me whether they think, based on what they've heard and the responses, whether it's good enough or it needs to be adapted, or whether we abandon it and do something else. So we've got that process up and running. In terms of coming back to, so that's intended to deal with this, I've heard there are problems, sort of stuff floating around out in the greater community. It's to try and, well, what is the problem? What are people concerned about? And then put a reality check around that. Is it a real issue, or is it just a perception? So put it in front of the people who really know the stuff and test them on it, and then deal with the issues as they arise. So where this would be used is for things like monitor bores. So where is the water? How old is it? Which way is it going? How good is it now? What is the land use across the catchment? How much is coming out of the bottom of those systems? Is it realistic? Is it real? So what you're putting into the model makes sense in terms of what you're dealing with coming out. What is the age and direction of the groundwater? So it's things like lysimeters under cropping systems, it's monitor bores across the plain.
Do we have enough monitor bores?
Well, you can never have enough of anything in this space. Science is a bit like, I don't know, there's an analogy, but if you ask a good scientist, do they have enough data, they'll always tell you no. They'll always tell you they want more. What we're trying to do is set up what is a fit-for-purpose bar here? What have we got enough in order to answer the questions in front of us? Hence, going back to the advisory groups, we're having those sorts of conversations. If we wanted to, I could consume this entire council's budget on science and data, I could do that quite comfortably. And we'd end up with something that was incredibly sophisticated, but would probably more than we actually need for the issue in front of us. So we're coming back to what is a fit-for-purpose approach to get the information into the model, to run it, to provide realistic answers around scenarios that our community are putting in front of us for policy development. So hence, coming back to, yes, would we have enough? We believe this will nicely fill some gaps. Inevitably, you have gaps in a network. This will nicely fill gaps in a monitor network. Could we spend more? Absolutely. Could we spend yet less? Yes, we could. But again, you'd end up with a situation where you'd have a model output, an answer, if you like, and there'd be a larger degree of uncertainty around whether it was, the actual answer was over here or over here. The model is trying to squeeze up the bounds of error, if you like, in the scenarios to say, look, it's saying the answer is in here and we're confident that the bounds are here to here, not out here.
Before you ask your second question, don't encourage him if he wants more.
Well, I'm
more-
afraid I
more
am. I
sites.
mean, it seems to me that the lesson of the last exercise is that we can spend the money at the end of the day fighting about who's right, or we can invest prudently in making sure that we have uncontestable data coming in to these models in the first place. Otherwise, we're going to wind up in exactly the same situation of, your hydrologist says this, my hydrologist says that. But it does seem like so much is going to be driven by this model at the end of the day in the heartland of the agricultural base of Hawke's Bay here, that we really should not be parsimonious in what kind of data is collected up front to fuel this whole model going forward.
And look, I'd just reinforce, absolutely acknowledge those points. I'd just reinforce that that's the purpose of the advisory groups and the panels, is to go back and test it, to say, have we done enough? Is it good enough? Can we avoid the situation where you've got one hydrologist saying black, the other saying white? And look, I'm not naively thinking out of this we end up with a completely uncontested process, but we want to knock off as many of those possibilities as possible to get to a pretty tidy end package.
Further questions, Councillor?
Yeah, Mr Chairman, well, I'd certainly endorse Councillor Belford's comments, but look, my question is a wider one about tank, and that is, unless I'm missing something, there's no real reporting process for what's going on? Is there? I don't know what's going on.
So, do you mean directly back to the council?
Yes.
There's a update provided, probably a little bit infrequently, but regularly, to the Regional Planning Committee. And that's sort of the main mechanism for reporting back at this stage, because the reason for that is it will be leading to a plan change.
Yeah, and when's the likely time frame to lead to a plan change?
2017.
2017. Right. Okay. Well, I just think it's so important that we get Plan Change 7 right, because there are too many problems with Plan Change 6, and I'd like to be better informed as to what's going on with the tank process.
Great thinking. Just, can you jot your questions down? We've got the tourism guys here, and we'll come back to this. I'm going to call for a very quick adjournment because I've been drinking 3 carafes of water trying to keep the cough down, and there's a consequence to that. So if you could give me 2 minutes, please. Everyone have a